So I'm going to actually start off with Jeff Sanders from Microsoft. Jeff is a chief architect at Microsoft, waving at us. I'll let him speak for a minute and then pass it on to the next.
Cool. Thanks so much, Tushar. Yeah, my name is Jeff Sanders. I'm a chief architect at Microsoft Federal. I've been with Microsoft for about 5 years now. I oversee 6 different solution areas covering cloud infrastructure, data platform, AI, modern work, business applications, security, compliance, and identity. Run the gamut of things. Really excited to be part of this panel. I think AI really is kind of the next phase of computing, and we're injecting it in a lot of our products and services, but it really has the ability to make impact at a global scale writ large. So super excited to be part of this conversation. Welcome the probing questions as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. And I'm sure you'll get a lot of questions about OpenAI and ChatGPT that Microsoft has a stake in and integrating into Bing and all that awesome stuff. Let's move on to Mr. Sid Sinha.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon to everybody here. My name is Sid Sinha. I am currently the Chief Technology Officer at Social Security Administration, the United States federal government. I have been in the federal service for the last 12 years, in IT for almost 3 decades. My role within the agency is basically emerging technology. We run an incubator program, innovation program. I run the incubator team and a lab and really look at tech strategy and how our agency services could be benefited from new and modern technology.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sid. Welcome. All right. Off to Joe Mariani.
There we go. Thanks, Tushar. Joe Mariani. I lead research into emerging technology and government for Deloitte's Center for Government Insights, our kind of internal think tank on all things government. So really, yeah, we're taking the perspective of what happens when AI and new technology collides with existing organizations, everything from testifying for Congress for what does AI mean for legislation, all the way through to what it can mean for military readiness and everything in between. So yeah, very much looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for joining. Joe is an incredible source of research and wealth of information. Jose.
Hey guys, so it's an honor to be here. My name is Jose Arrieta. Was the CIO, Chief Data Officer of HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services in the United States during the pandemic. I did the first blockchain implementation in the U.S. public sector. The first three built the largest, population health surveillance system in our nation's history, and the largest implementation of supervised machine learning to move therapeutics and predict outbreaks during the pandemic. Since then, I've been unemployed playing around with modern programs to use machine learning and computer vision to analyze how, if someone's maybe shooting a jump shot or hitting a golf ball. I'm also an advisor to different defense apparatuses at the secretary level on emerging technology and their impact on long-term competitive rivalry, specifically in quantum artificial intelligence and cybersecurity.
Incredible. And that's just me. I am a part-time adjunct faculty at UMD. I have my own small consulting company. And I love to teach, consult, and train. And I do that for individuals and corporates. I do some mentoring and coaching as well. All right. First question for the panel. How will AI reshape the current products and services? So in the world of ad tech, for example, at a recent Bloomberg event, the futurist was postulating or were postulating that advertisement technology will not require any human intervention. AI will generate the content, publish the content, gather feedback, analyze, update, personalize, do the whole thing, right? So that changes the entire game in terms of advertising technology and that entire product suite. We'll jump in and ask the product experts here, panelists here for their insights. We'll kick it off with Mr. Jose Arrieta and see what kind of expertise or insights you want to provide in the context of products and services and how AI will shape or reshape them. And Jose, feel free to pass on the baton to the other panelists when you're done. So
Yeah. So just a couple of high level kind of thoughts on this and some of them from real world experience. I think it really breaks down into a couple of buckets. And if you want to be involved in this business, you have to understand them. The first thing is when you look at a large bureaucratic structure and kind of having done this both during the pandemic and before, what happens with something like artificial intelligence and personalization is that the bureaucratic structure itself is no longer relevant. And so you're going to you're going to create a significant amount of change within an organization. Now, I'll give you a real world example. In one of the implementations of blockchain we did, we just personalized data access at the lowest level in the organization. But when you look at a bureaucracy, the whole point of that bureaucracy is multiple levels of approval. And when you start to personalize and provide personalized data access based on the worker's need, what happens is the bureaucratic approval process is disrupted significantly, right? And it creates a lot of change from a cultural perspective that's very, very hard to digest. And I think one of the things that you have to be ready for is that in a world led by AI, you really have to develop a skill set on how to manage that and how to navigate that from an implementation perspective. I think the second point that, and this is something that I learned from the pandemic, is one of the things we learned in the pandemic, we could fundamentally change the behavior of an entire city based on the way we communicated at a zip code level throughout that ecosystem. So there's a personalization to an individual, but there's also the personalization to a region, a zip code, a county on the basis of different words and different ways that communication will drive their emotional response to certain activities. So I think that, when you look at artificial intelligence and you look at a bureaucracy and you look at kind of computing capabilities, they tend to be very cut and dry. They don't involve any kind of emotional analysis. And I think that understanding the impact from an emotional perspective on the words that are being generated by generative artificial intelligence and how it will drive behavior. And a lot of times it's been talked about as propaganda, but how it will fundamentally drive behavior from a product perspective by the individual end user becomes very important. It also becomes a huge risk. And then I think the last kind of point of this that's really interesting, I'm doing some really cool work um, with Dortmund, which is a football team in Germany, soccer football team in Germany. And one of the really interesting pieces of that work is we're creating kind of personalized chatbot, generative AI capabilities for each fan, and we're allowing them to own their data. We're allowing them to design merchandise. We're allowing them to kind of publish that and get feedback from a larger universe of folks that maybe follow the same team and own their own content. Any videos that they create, all enabled by the generative artificial intelligence and then cryptographic data wraps that allow them to actually own that. When you empower people in that way, how do you make sure that they understand the value that you're giving them? How do you make sure that they understand what it is that they actually own? How do you make sure that they understand uh, how to kind of interact, the user interface that's going to be designed, that's going to allow them to take their creativity and interact in this larger world, because they're used to working through these large centralized platforms that own the data and that profit from the data. So to me, those are the three things that I think when you look at the products and services as they're deployed, you're going to see significant reshape, disruption in bureaucratic structures because they're no longer needed. And so now at the lowest level, how do you educate so that people can take data and information and make decisions on their own in partnership with their generative artificial intelligence? Then how do you create an understanding of ownership, and how do you develop some level of emotional intelligence in the products that you design? Because these products are going to be directly touching and impacting people. So when I look at it from my experience, I think those are some really interesting areas where you'll see a fundamental reshape in culture and how culture interacts with technology. And I think it's a huge opportunity. I'll pause there. Those are just the 3 points I wanted to make. I'm happy to kind of pass it over, to Microsoft or our friends from SSA Deloitte, if you guys want to comment.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jose. I know at Microsoft, the question we've been in business for 48 years now, and kind of where is AI and where's that intersection of AI into our product portfolio? So, what we're seeing is we're integrating AI and OpenAI and DALL-E 2 and a lot of the other models that are out there that we develop across our product suite. And I think there's obviously the implications of what it means from a business standpoint as well as from an organization and a culture standpoint. Cloud infrastructure, we're integrating AI so that it becomes more efficient, more resilient. A lot of our customers are seeing that they're being optimized for performance and reducing unnecessary costs, which we oftentimes see in government, things like that. They get a bill and it's what am I paying for here? Our cloud app innovators, developing software and solutions at a much faster pace. And as product managers, we all want to be out there and be able to meet our deadlines and deliver of high quality. But not only that, the technology like Azure Copilot's able to go in and say, hey, someone's already written code like this. You might run up against an intellectual property debate. You want to change your code. You can kind of head that off at the pass in advance. Our cloud data platform already becoming self-optimizing, doing some pretty neat things there, from prescriptive, helping to save database administrators and data engineers on helping to get to market much faster. Collaboration tooling like Teams. We've actually already summarizing meetings and summarizing emails, things like that. I actually got jumped into a call. I don't know about you guys, but I'm typically quadruple booked with most calls. And so right now, when I get into Teams calls, I'll get actually summary after it saying, hey, this could have been better covered in an email, and here's what you missed by not attending this. That saves my day saves my time every day. Really like that. Business applications as product managers too. I mean, you have to be able to go in and understand your customers' need, their industry. So they might be in telco, they might be in oil and gas, or supply chain, or manufacturing, or stuff like that. I mean, taking time to learn the technology is one thing, but taking as much time to learn the finance, operations, stuff like that, you have to know the domain expertise. So AI is doing great to really disrupt that and find better ways to educate product managers and business analysts and people who work on product as to what's important to that industry. And then lastly, our security, compliance, and identity folks. I mean, they're becoming just more secure, more compliant, stronger unified identity as a result of AI. So I think AI cross cuts our product suite. We're getting to do some more exciting things with that. Joe, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, Jeff, I love that idea of kind of cross-cutting or embedding AI in everything, right? Because that's what we see from the broader perspective as well. Is so much of this sounds like it's new, but in some sense, these tools have been around for a while. Even Gen AI, for all its kind of recent press coverage, like Vodafone in Italy was using Gen AI to tailor and personalize subscription messages back in like 2020. It saw significant 40% increases of subscription rates. So the tools are out there, and in some sense, we're just becoming aware of them because, like you said, they've been embedded in so many other products. I think that's actually the measure of success, right? Mark Weiser, the former computer scientist from PARC, in his paper introducing the idea of ubiquitous computing, talked about the idea of like, hey, what's the most successful technology you can think of? And most of us think about like, yeah, AI, cloud, your cell phone. His argument was, it's the alphabet, right? Because it's the technology that we drive down the street. We look at a sign. We don't see the alphabet as a technology anymore. We just get the information it seeks to convey. And that was his idea of, hey, that's a successful technology where it just bleeds into the background. And I think that's where we're going with AI, exactly like you're describing, Jeff, where it's becoming embedded in so many other technologies. We're well on the way to, how does AI reshape products? Well, it's just embedded in all of them, becomes kind of transparent.
Yeah, yeah, that's impressive. And Joe, you by alphabet you meant A B C D alphabet the company. Awesome, incredible. I don't know, Sid or anyone else, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Basically, coming from the perspective that I bring to this panel, which is a large consuming agency, right? I mean, we are a large enterprise. Of course, we are a federal agency at Social Security Administration. And we want to use AI for the services we provide to the citizens and to our end users, our workers, right? So the jobs that they do, whatever that might be, they are processing information, they are generating letters, they are looking at pictures, or they're optimizing a scheduling issue. We expect that AI is going to be a force for good, right? That it is going to bring in efficiencies, it's going to bring in consistency, going to bring in high quality, and ultimately improve really the environment in which our internal employees work and the services that they provide to our millions and millions of uh, customers that we call essentially the public that interacts with this agency. So AI is going to be baked in everything. That's what I expect. That's what I think we predict will happen. So it's going to really shape anything and everything you do. Will have a baked in AI. I mean, we've all been using Siri on the phone, like you ask Siri a question, or Alexa. These are really AI applications. you've already been using it. If you've asked a question of Siri or Alexa, you've already used AI in some way, right? Now it's just getting applied in different contexts because more computing is available, more research is being done, more money is being put on it, and that's where this is headed. I think the recent news came out that the U.S. federal government is going to put in, I think, $140 million on just straight AI research. Will be, I think, for grant making to the National Science Foundation. So it is, of course, here, but it was already here. But now it's going to just get bigger. So that's what I expect is going to happen to products and services. It's just really going to create a whole new industries, whole new careers, whole new. It might. I know you've got a question on jobs and careers. Will go next, but maybe that's a good jump off point. At how does it impact work?
I just like to just comment on one thing Sid said, and then I'll shut up. And I think it's really interesting when you look at current products. We talked a lot about reshaping current products and that it's already being used, but I think it's looking to the future of it's going to extend these large cloud platforms to the edge itself. So you're going to have roots of trust in sensor endpoints. You're going to have autonomous endpoints that, just like a car or a data center on wheels, you're going to have new payment systems that facilitate artificial intelligent generated payments between microservices in a microservices architecture, right? And I think there's a suite of examples of some modern tools that maybe have been thought of before, but never really executed and deployed in the real world that will come to life and that will become the payments example. I think it's $1 trillion market, right? Pay, payments and transactions between microservices. So there's a whole suite of new tools that are just going to extend cloud computing to the edge and treat machine endpoints as if they were human endpoints with all of the support that a human being gets when they look at the stop sign that has the letters in the alphabet that say stop, and the human recognizes that they have to press the gas pedal and stop. And that, just don't lose sight of the fact that that's the future opportunity in the space.
Yeah.
So talk about the car. A car, a autonomous self-driving vehicle is essentially a complete AI machine. Just really software that's running. So that's already here. That's happened. So
Yeah, absolutely. And imagine I want to go to work. I don't own a car in the future anymore. I have this subscription service. The car shows up at 8:30, honks at my door and says, "Tushar, time to go to work. It's gonna take 25 minutes. Why aren't you here already?" Takes me to work and goes on its way, right? I mean, autonomous endpoints, all cloud generated, AI driven, as connections into my endpoint, makes me a phone call. I'm here, right? I mean, it's incredible the possibilities are. All right, so let's transition into the next exciting question, which is what does this do to the jobs and careers of the future? Historically, calculators changed what used to be the counting and the simple arithmetic. Internet democratized knowledge, so it wasn't about knowledge hoarding, knowledge learning anymore. Knowledge was available at your fingertips. What will AI do? How will it change the skills that we need to acquire to do the jobs of the future? And I'm going to let maybe Jeff lead us and hand it off.
Yeah, thanks, Tushar. So yeah, great question. So for everyone, hopefully, if you're on this call, you've actually used ChatGPT, you've used OpenAI before. This is a conversation I had with some colleagues a couple months ago, actually. One of the things AI will not do, AI will not provide life experience. You can ask a question of ChatGPT, you can ask it to generate something for you. It'll provide you some knowledge. It'll provide you a syntactic response based upon language that it found or knowledge it found out there with its data repositories. It's going to give you knowledge. It's not going to give you wisdom. For that, human beings are always going to provide that wisdom. Colleague of mine, Kevin Tupper, if you're not if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, definitely look him up and follow him. But he likes to say that OpenAI is like having a team of interns that are available to you, and they have vast amounts of research that they can that they can perform basically, and they can make recommendations for you. But OpenAI, it doesn't have life experience. It's not going to be able to tell you whether taking that recommendation is going to end up in your favor or not. And to your second question there, really, is AI going to kill jobs or create them? In my opinion, AI, it's going to make people more effective across the board. Less time is going to be spent digging through different information sources. And instead, you can really offload that research and offload that question and that syntax out to the neural net. And we're seeing it in legal, we're seeing it in healthcare, we're seeing it in a lot of regulated industries and education as well. In terms of creating jobs, there's already 4 jobs that we've identified at Microsoft that we find that we're hiring for. Actually, the first one, prompt engineers. So with AI and with generative AI, you really have to be specific about what you're asking it to do. The more specific you are in terms of your instruction, the better your output will be. So prompt engineers, these are people whose job it is to best phrase prompts in order to drive for the best results. If you say, design me an image of this or create me a recipe for this, it's going to give you just a simple response. But if it's create a recipe for a pizza that involves these different types of doughs with these different types of ingredients, you're going to get a much better resulting recipe from that. So prompt engineers, that's definitely a career of the future. Second one, people who provide access to data. What you find is with these large language models, they're trained upon large sources of data, publicly available data sets, data that's out on the internet. But so many corporations and companies have their own proprietary data stores. And so what you'll see in the future are more jobs really created for people who broker access to data from law firms or medical agencies or any different types of company that might have product research who want to decide how much internal IP that they would like to maybe sell or make available to partners. The third job that we're seeing a lot of kind of uptick on are research analysts and reporters. There's a huge uptick here because people need to validate AI data that you train these models on and that you use inferencing on. So I can ask ChatGPT a question like, "What's the population of Montgomery County, Maryland?" And it might give me a response. But if I ask, "What's the population of Montgomery County, Maryland, based upon census data?" I might get a different thing. So you need to know how that data is being derived upon and who ultimately how that model has been sourced as well. Kind of the decision paths and assumptions. So definitely another path there in the future. And then lastly, and I see some of the questions in the chat, AI ethicist. So is AI being used in the right way to really serve customers and serve humanity and remain really true to a company's values too? That's my insights on that. Sid, do you have anything?
Or anyone else for that matter. Whoever wants to jump in. I think Sid is muted.
Yeah, sorry, I got muted by there, but I think you covered it pretty nicely there, Jeff, for us. But I would like to add that, to really emphasize again, coming from the perspective that I've already seen, that it's very critical to really bring in the human expert, uh, the ultimate sort of decision making about what AI gives. AI would be great for research. AI would be great for synthesis. AI would be great for analytical, making sense of it, and really the speed and the access that it can bring. But ultimately, what should we do? Yes, AI could probably make the decision too, but there are many instances where that would not be appropriate. And I think we will see jobs evolve. So certain kind of jobs, if they are just really rote and repetitive and dull and sort of, those types of jobs may be what that will change. And instead, they would be elevated to more value added work or sort of really, as you said, like looking at how to use AI. There was a quote I read. I can't attribute where I read it from, but I just remember it. It's not that the AI will take someone's job. It's the person who knows how to use AI will take your job. So the competition is just another person who's smarter and knows how to use AI. Is the competition, not the AI itself. So I think that's important to keep in mind here.
Yeah, Sid makes there's some really interesting points here. I did a talk at Columbia University many years ago when I was in government, and we talked about it, operationalizing intuition. And I don't know the jobs. I would rely on Microsoft, someone like Sid, to talk about the jobs of the future. But what I do know, and I'm kind of in a lot of the entrepreneurial work that I do, is that one of the things that's going to happen with artificial intelligence is you're going to be able to operationalize intuition. And depending on the values of the society that you're a part of, that's going to create different types of jobs, right? So if the values of the society are around an individual, you are giving an individual tools to actually become an artist, to create a new business model at the lowest level within an organization, right? Depending on the society and the value system of that society, AI is going to create different types of jobs. And And when you look at it, it allows you to operationalize test intuition very rapidly and very rapidly scale modern business models, modern capabilities to develop art, and test it extremely quickly. And I think that that's unique, right? So it's not about what jobs create; it's about how will it allow society to express their value based on the values of the society that they live in, and how much disruption is that going to create within that societal system. And as I said, in a government organization, it's going to create a massive amount of disruption, right? Because the lowest level of the organization is going to be empowered, and it's going to create havoc within that bureaucratic structure. How does that interact in modern society? Like, I don't know, but I think it's a really interesting point when you think about the future with this tool set.
Yeah. Jose, I really like that idea of like AI as a tool for achieving what we collectively value. Because you can think about that at kind of the task level, like Sid was saying, hey, there's certain tasks that are amenable to AI versus humans. At that job level, like Jeff was saying, hey, there's some jobs have a reduction in workload, some jobs are entirely new. The thing that I think I find gets forgotten a lot is, hey, work also gets done at the organizational level. And AI could be an incredible tool there to accomplish that kind of the collective goals. And I think Jeff gave a great example of it earlier. Like if we think about how does an organization accomplish a goal, a task, whatever the case may be, we'd probably lay out, well, here's the org chart or here's the process flow. But if you actually look at how those tasks are accomplished, they're much more organic, right? It's not an org chart. It's a network of individuals who are connected together. We study this a lot, especially in like innovation about how ideas are either created or diffused across an organization. But the challenge has always been like gathering that data is time consuming and analyzing it in these social network graphs is really difficult. But now, like I get from teams an email every week. Here's a summary of all the people you interacted with, graphed by the amount of time you spent. So those like being able to use AI as a tool to automate some of that social network understanding of how organizations actually work, I think is a really cool thing that'll be kind of transformational in terms of how we understand jobs and careers and all of that stuff to achieve kind of how work is done.
Yeah, yeah, incredible, incredible. I think the future jobs will be more exciting than they are right now. Brings us to the next question, which is probably on everyone's mind: the ethical implications of AI, right? So, um, even in its infancy right now, which is how I view AI. I think a lot is yet to come, even though we have been at it for some time now. Even right now, it's showing a lot of promise, as well as some quirks and some things that are not as desirable, right? So recently, when Sam Altman of OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, when he was in front of the U.S. Senate, he openly embraced the need for regulations, and depending on where you stand, you may say, okay, of course it makes sense for him or whatever, but but if you look at the issue at hand, there is a need for certain level of oversight, because AI is a tool, and ultimately any tool can be used for good or bad, right? Um, Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking have issued multiple warnings about AI, and how we should be careful in using it. So let's get some insights from the panel. Maybe kick it off with Sid, if you don't mind. How do you think about the bad actors and them using this AI as a tool, and how do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? What are your thoughts?
I think you brought up some good leading points in your lead in there. So it is a tool. It is technology. It's data. It's we write code. Of course, AI can write code too and create other applications. But then, does AI suddenly decide one day to get up in the morning and write a new application? Uh, that goes to the level of what's known as general artificial intelligence, which is not something we're talking about. We're really talking about specific uses of artificial intelligence. So it's a tool, and it can be used for good or it can be used for ill. So the question is, what all goes behind it? So really, it is software. It can be managed, and just like software, it'll have bugs. And when there are bugs, it will be misused by bad actors. So if you have got an AI that is looking at a certain data set, and if it is hacked, that AI can be used for ill-gotten gains for that same data set, right? There's a lot that is happening in the industry. You mentioned about how even the the leads in this area are seeking uh, uh, compliance and regulations, and that's where we need to go. What we talk about is ethical. Like, back in the day, we used to talk about explainable AI. Can you actually explain what the AI did, right? Because it's just doing something, right? It's kind of figuring it out based on, maybe supervised or unsupervised learning. So what did it really do? And what is coming down to me, the way more I think about it, and it's sort of more of my personal opinion, is do we have good insight, and can we explain the data that was used to train that AI model? And does that data set have inherent biases or inaccuracy? Is it representative of what we want to accomplish? And there are enough examples out in media that people may have heard of that, AI, let's say facial recognition AI, it doesn't recognize certain skin colors or skin tones based on the data set it was used to train on. Similarly, let's say voice recognition AI. It may not catch an accent very well, right? It's trained on one accent, but it doesn't read the other accent, or right? Or let's say there are cultural types of things. Let's say in one society, let's say in this country, in the US, we have a certain ideas about how society interacts, how people interact, and that's considered normal and professional. But in some other cultures, some other practices might be considered normal and appropriate, right? But cultures are different. Language differs between cultures. So an AI may miscalculate what seems to be normal in one context, but is not okay in another context. So these are inherent problems. You can call them bugs, software bugs, right? Or they are errors and biases and problems. Now, how they get used for malintent is really where I am very interested to see. And in the space of products, right now, services, it is becoming imperative that products and services understand what their AI is doing, how that was trained, uh, how that was tested, where it was deployed, and can we sort of say that that is what a human would have done, right? And that kind of a correlation is sort of where we need to go. Those are really the concerns that we would have if when we don't control that, and government regulations will be needed. And working from a federal government perspective, we are constantly working under various executive mandates, right? These are presidential orders, the executive orders, and we have several of them. One that's saying every agency as a federal government, we must be very transparent about where do we use AI. There are other executive orders that are saying that you must root out any algorithmic bias, any algorithmic discrimination, like I just told you a few examples of earlier. That cannot be the case. We cannot have AI done poorly, haphazardly, that it inherently brings in bias and discrimination. The third issue is privacy or security, right? If my data is out there and some AI machine learning model is sort of using it without clear idea of how my data got there and what's being used for, then it's probably violating a whole lot of individual rights I have as security and privacy of my data. So those are the big concerns, and those the industry or the individuals, product managers or product creators, you have a responsibility to sort of understand all of that and bring in that perspective into the product management place. Jose, your thought.
Yeah, no, Sid, I think you really, I think what an amazing example of how you grapple with those challenges at a federal level. And you just reminded me how happy I am. I'm no longer grappling with those challenges. But I just want to make one point from my past experience in federal government. And I think it's really interesting. Uh, and I'll just give you an example of that point. Should the regulation be that AI is available to everyone? Right? Now, think about that for a second, right? We want to regulate and ensure that there's non-bias. Well, maybe making it available to everyone creates a representation of at least the intent and understanding and use of AI in the United States, right? Where we have places in the United States that still don't have access to broadband. So I asked that question. I don't know the answer because from a regulatory perspective, you can regulate how it's managed. But if you start with regulating how it's accessed, you fundamentally are expressing your values on a broader society, and it's going to give you a different outcome than if you regulate than if you start someplace else. The second point that I want to mention, I've never said this publicly. I've largely, since my time in government, I've tried to catch up on sleep and spend as much time with family as I could, given my last role during the pandemic. But one of the things that I struggled with during the pandemic, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, is that we were fundamentally changing the behavior of cities in the United States. Like, we could literally use certain words, and we could behave in a manner, and we could predict how many more people would wear masks. But and when you say what data did you have access to? I had access to every CCTV camera feed. I had access to every cell phone data. Very limited number of people, and we could drive those changes in behavior. And it brings up this ethical question: should a centralized entity have that visibility and be able to drive those fundamental changes, right? And in how a society behaves. And it's a really, I don't know the answer to the question. I know I struggled with it many times as a leader in that role and controlling all the data for the entire nation and being able to see the behaviors it drove. But this tool and the way that it's rolled out is going to create that type of capability for a centralized entity that has that visibility. So go back to Sid's point on privacy, and you see the importance of having that discussion and making sure that there's literacy associated with digital data ownership and what that means, just like financial literacy, making sure that everybody has access to a generative artificial intelligence capability at a reasonable cost and it's deployed in all educational systems, right? It becomes very important because that's how bias is created if you don't address those things. So I just think that, I don't know the answers, but it's a really deep topic to get into, and the impact will affect multiple generations. Our kids, our grandkids, their grandkids, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. This is an incredible point, and I think as a society we need to come together and decide. We need to talk about it. We need to debate it, and we need to decide how we're going to shape it. Right? Our institutions, our legal constructs, our societal constructs, all of these, and we need to be actively participating instead of sitting on the sidelines and watching. Any additional thoughts? If
Yeah,
not,
I'll kind of pick up from where Jose was going because I think I'm the inveterate optimist, so I try to see the positives here. And well, I certainly don't envy the challenges for Sid and Jose in terms of navigating some of these ethical challenges as a public servant. But I think, to Jose's point, as AI is a tool, if we get that kind of pairing of human and machine right, there's actually really good positive ethical implications as well, insofar as, you know, we know that there's significant bias or even more precisely kind of noise inside existing human judgment, right? There's studies on bail decisions, for example, that are super famous where right before lunch, when judges are hungry, you're more likely to get sent to prison. Same thing if your local sports team has lost that like the weekend prior. So we know there's like this lots of undesirable variability in human judgment. And because AI doesn't have that context awareness, it can actually be a really positive force in removing some of that unwanted variability in human judgment and getting some of the more kind of consistent decisions we want. So researchers from U Chicago have done this on 750,000 bail decisions. And they found that, if you used AI in the right way with human judgment, you could reduce the pretrial detention population by almost half, like 42%, and still reduce the likelihood of crime being perpetrated by folks released. So, if we get this right, it really has some there's challenges to be navigated. But there's also some really interesting, good ethical possibilities as well.
absolutely. I'm going to move us along and bring us, since we have about 10 minutes left, we'll hopefully be able to answer a question or two. But let's talk about its influence, AI's influence in product management. Product management as a profession, what can we do? What can we do differently? How can we, so AI can be leveraged for getting deep customer insights now. AI engine can be run on all kinds of feedback that we are getting from our servicing teams, from open research that we can do, understanding user research and behavior and running experiments. It can analyze emerging trends. Keep a watchful eye on our competition, what it's doing, what is working, all of that, and it can really help us accelerate product development, product management. So based on a lot of research, Joe, that you do with your team at Deloitte, what do you think? How do you think we can help shape the profession here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the good thing is we've actually got a lot of the big rocks out on the table. So to kind of just pick two of them and kind of wrap up with those, I think the first thing is, if we're going to get the most out of this human machine team, like we've been talking about, we got to change the process. We can't just bolt existing technology or new technology onto existing processes. And this is something we've looked at kind of from the task level up. So if you look at the federal workforce, for example, the number one task that the entire federal workforce does is documenting and recording information. It's like 400 million hours a year. And a lot of those are pretty automatable. And the idea is, so what happens if we automate? Especially given that like the federal workforce spends like about 21% of its time doing kind of non-core tasks, all the kind of busy work, not actually doing the mission. The idea is that's a great opportunity for AI, if we find this human machine teaming right, to reduce some of that burden of kind of non-core busy work tasks to allow workers to shift to kind of new more value added tasks. And the question is, hey, is that going to happen? Do we do that? Do we reduce headcount? The open question, it depends on who you ask, what their priorities are. But if we look historically, we tend to see that that's what happens, that, right, folks shift where they spend their time. We still have kind of the same amount of workers, but we shift where they spend their time. And that's even kind of not just look at AI, but hey, we looked at things like electronic health records in hospitals, or automation for police officers is another great example. Like 1970, police officers only spent about half their time on actual like crime related tasks. By 2012, when you have laptops in the cars and more radios and all this connectivity, it actually has increased. It's 80%. But this gets to Jose's point about kind of like cultural values. Raises the question, hey, is that actually a net good thing? Is that kind of how we want our law enforcement operators or our doctors to be operating? And that really gets to the second thing, is like, hey, look, at the end of the day, this is all about people's goals and trust. And it's goals in the sense of, what do we collectively want out of these technologies? Do we want more efficiency, or, do we want more human interaction? Do we want cost savings or personalized service? Because when you ask people, often we always say like, yeah, I want a more efficient doctor visit, for example, right? But you go up to the doctor now and you have someone typing and not looking at you, and we hate it. So we need mechanisms to actually unearth, like, what do we actually really value in a particular case or a particular product? And then once we are able to do that, then we can start to trust. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And sorry, one last thing so I guess the idea is then, like, it becomes that trust question of like cultural variation. There's a lot of cultural variation we talked about. We see some of the comments, but ultimately it's all about how you demonstrate value to folks. So if we're able to understand what they value, then we can deliver that value. That'll earn trust, and that will lead to the adoption that we're ultimately aiming for.
All right. Any other panelists want to jump in? How will it?
I'd like to probably just, I think Joe was correct that some of the big items was brought up. So, what is AI? How will it change product and services? What is good and bad about it, right? How will careers evolve? And basically, AI will be in everything. If you're making heavy equipment, machinery, the civil engineering space, ocean engineering space, making software for high tech, could be in the medical industry. It doesn't matter what industry you are in and what you do. There is an application of AI. Just like there's an application of computers today, there's an application of AI. It's going to happen. It's happening. So as product managers, you've got to understand what that is in what space you are in, what kind of products you're in, where will AI. You have to be very open to bringing in, to innovate, to try things out, but be very careful that it is meeting the standards, whatever the local government may be, or there are no international standards. There are frankly even no government, like even national standards right now, but those will be coming. They need to come. And I think we product managers have a responsibility to guide that kind of conversation. They need to be able to expose what their AI is embedded in their product, and is it trustworthy? Is it responsible use or not? Right. So it cannot just be for efficiency and value addition, but also the defensiveness that it was done right way and it is going to do the right thing. So that's what I would say. Product managers need to be really thinking about what AI means in their profession.
So Sid, I'm sorry, Tushar, I have to because Sid and Joe said something that kind of just prompted me to think of this. I was in an executive education course once at the Kennedy School, and the leadership expert said, his name is Ronald Heifetz. He said something really interesting that I've never forgotten. I was probably like 28 years old when I was there, and I'm way older now. So he said, sometimes you got to go down on the dance floor and dance with everybody, and sometimes you got to go up on the balcony and watch everybody dance. And you can't be on the dance floor the whole time, right? And he said that's leadership. And I think that when you think about future product managers, right, they really have to understand how society works, and they have to understand the type of disruption that the product they're building may create. They have to understand the emotional impact of the product they're building, especially if it's touching an end consumer. And then they're going to have to go down on the dance floor and dance, but they also have to go back up on the balcony and understand the impact that it's having. And they have to be able to vacillate from those two perspectives. I need to be able to look at society, and need to be able to engage in society and create things that, hopefully create some level of benefit based on what I think is right within society as a whole. That's a different skill set than constantly being engaged with your end customer and constantly trying to improve their outcome. It's a different skill set to be able to zoom in and kind of back out. And I think that that's leadership with these tools. I really do. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That is incredible. Loved the conversation. I don't know where the whole hour went by, right? The 500 plus at one point number of attendees from all over the globe. This is awesome. Look at the chat, all the conversations going, the deep insights from the panelists, the Q&A that John can barely keep up with. If there are any additional questions, feel free to explore. Come join us. To check out UMD's MPPM website. This is an incredible source and wealth of knowledge. I hope you join us for an upcoming orientation and the program where you will get to hear from and work with panel experts like these over here and many more, right? So a minute to go. I'm going to close this out unless John, you have anything to add, or Dr. James Green, who is the head of the program, wants to give a word.
The word I'd offer is just thank you. Thank you so much, Sid, Jeff, Jose, Joe, Tushar. Thank you for this wonderful hour. I know I learned a lot, and I hope everyone will think about joining us at the MPM program. Our product management program is trying to wrestle with how to bring technology into products and services. And we're going to continue to build this community, trying to think and solve for the wonderful future that's ahead of us with AI, as we talked about. Lots of problems to solve, but lots of opportunities too. So thank you very much.